What if the most powerful sports organization on Earth was built on bribery, secret deals, and offshore bank accounts? What if the game that unites billions of people every 4 years, the game that stops wars, empties cities, and breaks the internet, was being run by a cartel of corrupt officials skimming millions off the top? And what if the governments of the most powerful nations on Earth knew about it for decades and did nothing? This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the documented, FBI-investigated, U.S. Department of Justice prosecuted history of FIFA. Welcome to the story of the most powerful organization in sports, how it was born, how it grew into a global empire, and how the beautiful game got buried under one of the ugliest corruption scandals in modern history. Let's start with a number: 5 billion. That's the estimated number of people who watched some part of the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar. 5 billion. That is more than half of every human being alive on this planet. No single event, no election, no concert, no Olympic Games comes close to that number. FIFA, the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, controls not just the World Cup. It controls the rules of football globally, manages youth development programs across 211 member nations, more countries than the United Nations, and generates billions of dollars in revenue every 4 years through broadcasting rights, sponsorships, and licensing deals. And yet, for most of its history, almost nobody outside of football insiders truly understood what FIFA was, how it worked, or who was really in charge. That invisibility, that gap between FIFA's enormous global influence and public understanding of how it actually operated, is exactly how the corruption survived for so long. To understand what went wrong, we need to understand how it began. The year is 1904. Football, what Americans call soccer, is spreading rapidly across Europe. Different countries are playing by slightly different rules. Matches between international teams are chaotic. There's no governing body, no standardized referee system, no organized international competition. 7 European nations, France, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and Switzerland, meet in Paris and decide to fix this. They form FIFA on May 21st, 1904. The founding idea is simple and genuinely beautiful. One set of rules for the whole world's most popular sport. One organization, one game. In its early decades, FIFA is small, amateur, and cash poor. The first World Cup in 1930 in Uruguay is attended by only 13 nations, and most European teams refuse to make the long boat journey across the Atlantic. Uruguay wins on home soil. The world barely notices. But something is changing. Radio. Then, television. The 1966 World Cup in England brings football into living rooms around the world in ways the founders never imagined. Suddenly, FIFA controls access to the most watched sporting event on the planet. And access to that event is extraordinarily valuable. Enter João Havelange. In 1974, a Brazilian sports administrator named João Havelange becomes FIFA president. He is charming, politically skilled, and deeply ambitious. He makes FIFA a promise: expand the World Cup from 16 to 24 teams. Bring Africa and Asia fully into the competition. Grow the game globally. He delivers. Under Havelange, FIFA transforms from a small European club into a genuinely global institution. The World Cup becomes a commercial juggernaut. Major corporations, Coca-Cola, Adidas, television networks sign enormous deals. And with enormous money came an enormous problem. In 1998, Havelange is succeeded by his protege, a Swiss football administrator named Sepp Blatter. Under Blatter, FIFA's commercial empire continues to grow. But so does something else. a culture of secrecy, favoritism, and outright corruption that had been building quietly for decades. On May 27, 2015, Swiss police arrested 7 FIFA officials at a luxury hotel in Zurich. It was 6 in the morning. The arrests were coordinated with the United States Department of Justice and the FBI. What followed was one of the largest corruption prosecutions in the history of international sport. The indictment unsealed that day ran to 47 pages. It alleged that over a period of more than 20 years, FIFA officials had accepted over $150 million in bribes and kickbacks. The bribes were paid by sports marketing companies in exchange for broadcasting and marketing rights to the World Cup and other FIFA tournaments across North America, South America, and the Caribbean. The scheme worked like this. A company wanting exclusive rights to broadcast a World Cup in a particular region would pay a FIFA official or a regional confederation executive a secret payment, sometimes in cash, sometimes through shell companies in the Cayman Islands or Switzerland. The official would then award the contract to that company. The public never knew. The money never appeared in any financial statement. It was, in the words of U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch, the World Cup of fraud. By 2020, more than 40 individuals and entities had been charged or had pleaded guilty. The amounts involved were staggering. One single marketing company paid over $110 million in bribes to Latin American football officials over 2 decades. But the corruption wasn't limited to broadcasting deals. The most explosive accusation involved the selection of World Cup host nations themselves. In 2010, FIFA awarded the 2018 World Cup to Russia and the 2022 World Cup to Qatar in a single simultaneous vote, a process that shocked the football world. Russia was a credible host, many argued. But Qatar, a small nation in the Arabian Gulf with summer temperatures exceeding 50 degrees Celsius, no football tradition, and a population smaller than London, seemed almost inexplicable. Multiple investigations followed. Evidence emerged of payments to FIFA voters. Qatar spent an estimated $200 billion on infrastructure for the tournament, making it by far the most expensive World Cup in history. Workers' rights groups documented the deaths of thousands of migrant workers who built the stadiums in brutal conditions. In 2015, Sepp Blatter, who had survived every scandal for decades, finally resigned as FIFA president, 4 days after winning a 5th consecutive term in office. He was later banned from football for 8 years. His successor, Gianni Infantino, promised radical reform. And in some structural ways, FIFA has changed. Financial transparency is improved, ethics committees have been reformed. But questions remain, particularly about the 2026 World Cup, which will be jointly hosted by the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and the 2030 World Cup, which will span 6 countries across 3 continents, in what many critics call a logistical impossibility designed primarily to satisfy political relationships rather than sporting logic. Here is what makes the FIFA story scientifically and sociologically fascinating, and this is the part most people miss. FIFA's corruption didn't happen because a few bad people got lucky. It happened because of a specific structural design that made corruption almost inevitable. Think about how FIFA is actually governed. It operates as a private, not-for-profit organization registered in Switzerland. Its 211 member associations each get 1 vote in elections, meaning the Football Federation of the Cayman Islands has exactly the same voting power as the Football Federation of Brazil. Now consider a small, cash-poor football federation in a developing nation has enormous political power inside FIFA, and the officials running large commercial tournaments need those votes. The conditions for vote buying were baked into the structure from the very beginning. This is what economists call a principal-agent problem. The principals, the football fans of the world, are the people who ultimately fund FIFA through ticket purchases, merchandise, and the advertising revenue generated by their attention. But the agents, the FIFA officials making decisions, have interests that are entirely separate. And because football fans have no direct mechanism to hold FIFA accountable, the agents operate without meaningful oversight. It's the same structural problem you see in any institution that combines enormous money, limited transparency, and diffuse accountability. Pharmaceutical companies that manipulate drug trials, financial institutions that package toxic assets, political systems where lobbying goes unregulated. The money doesn't corrupt the institution. The structure creates the conditions in which corruption becomes rational. And the reason FIFA's corruption lasted so long is precisely because football itself is genuinely loved. The World Cup genuinely unites people. The game genuinely matters. That emotional reality created a protective fog around the institution that made critical scrutiny feel like an attack on the sport itself.
Blatter understood this brilliantly. Whenever corruption questions arose, he talked about football, about children in villages in Africa learning to play, about the beautiful game transcending politics and borders. And people listened, because those things are also true. The truth can be used to obscure the truth. That's one of the oldest tricks in the book.
Why does any of this matter beyond football? It matters because FIFA is a template. It is a near-perfect case study in how global institutions acquire power, resist accountability, and ultimately require external pressure, not internal reform, to change. The FBI's 2015 investigation succeeded not because FIFA suddenly became honest. It succeeded because U.S. prosecutors realized that any wire transfer passing through an American bank gave them jurisdiction. The entire corrupt system collapsed not from within, but from an external legal authority with both the power and the motivation to act. This is a lesson about every international institution you trust with something important. The World Health Organization, the International Olympic Committee, the United Nations Security Council, global financial institutions. Each of them faces versions of the same challenge: enormous influence, limited external accountability, and the permanent temptation to serve the interests of the insiders rather than the billions of people they nominally represent.
Understanding how FIFA worked and how it was eventually forced to change gives you a framework for understanding how any powerful global body actually operates beneath its public face. And it raises a question worth sitting with. If 5 billion people care enough about football to watch the World Cup, why did it take the FBI and not those 5 billion fans to hold FIFA accountable? What does that tell us about how ordinary people relate to the institutions that run the things they love most? In 1904, 7 men sat around a table in Paris and wrote the rules for a game they hoped would bring the world together. In many ways, it did. Football remains the most democratic sport on earth. All you need is a ball and a flat surface. It is played in war zones and palace courtyards, in favelas and school playgrounds. It genuinely crosses borders that almost nothing else can. But between that table in Paris in 1904 and the stadium in Qatar in 2022, something complicated happened. The beautiful game became a beautiful business, and the beautiful business attracted beautiful corruption. The story of FIFA is, in the end, a very human story. It is about what happens when an idea that starts with genuine idealism, one game, one world, collides with the oldest forces in human nature: money, power, and the remarkable ability of institutions to protect themselves at the expense of the people they were built to serve. The game itself survives. It always does. Because ultimately, football doesn't belong to FIFA. It belongs to the child kicking a can down a dirt road in Lagos, to the teenager watching a match at 3 a.m, to the grandparent who cries every time their national anthem plays before a World Cup kickoff. FIFA can be reformed. Institutions can change, slowly, imperfectly, under pressure. But the deeper question this story leaves us with is this: who should govern the things that matter most to the most people? And how do we build the structures that make honesty more rational than corruption? That question doesn't have an easy answer. But asking it honestly is where every real reform has ever begun. Like, subscribe, and comment. Do you think FIFA can truly be reformed? Or is the corruption too deep? Let us know below.